Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I do hope it finds you well. My name is John, and I am an author, and I'm coming to you here on another Talking Tuesday to talk about another big influence for me, which is the writing of Neil Gaiman, who's one of my, has been, since I really discovered his work, one of my favorite authors, and kind of, if I had someone whose, life, career I aspire to, it would, I think, be him. He just seems like a overall pretty cool and engaged guys, and just his work and advocating for writing and mental health and all that, just are really something I look up to. Um, I became familiar with Neil Gaiman, or the first thing I experienced from Neil Gaiman, I think was about a senior in high school, or actually right after. Actually, I think it was right after I graduated from high school, before I started college. I had gotten into, when I was like maybe a freshman or sophomore in high school, gotten into Terry Pratchett's Discworld series. Check out my video last week when I talk more about that. But a friend of mine recommended Good Omens to me and lent me his copy, which I devoured in like a day. Um, the book co-written by him, by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, about really, you should check it out. It's sort of a little bit, or it's kind of starts off a parody of the film of The Omen, but it's kind of, an angel and a demon who have been living on Earth for 6,000 years, realize they really quite like living on Earth, and so are working to try to stop the coming Armageddon or apocalypse, or whatever you want to call it. It is a really, really good, really, really insightful, philosophical, but also really, really funny book. Um, and that's sort of what I became familiar with. Um, I don't think I going forward. I'd read that, but I don't think I. I mean, going into college and having reading assignments and stuff like that, I didn't do a ton of free reading in general. I don't think I'd read any sort of. I reread Good Omens several times, but I don't think I did too much when I was an undergrad. But I'd had several people, talking about my love of Good Omens, recommend his graphic novel series, The Sandman, to me. Um, and told me a little bit about it. Through a combination of, again, being busy with assignments, and also I've never been super big into like comic books or graphic novels. But after, when I was a junior or senior in college, I decided to come across and got and read The Watchmen, um, short graphic novel series, which is it's an excellent story, and I really engaged with it, and I really engaged with the medium of, sort of both the story and the way it told visuals. So I remember very, very distinctly, after I graduated my undergrad, that I was going to grad school that fall. So I wanted to catch up and actually do some fun reading between my undergrad and starting grad school, because I knew I'd be very busy with reading again. So I went and bought the first volume of this sort of 10-volume collection, Preludes, called Preludes and Nocturnes, which is the first 8 issues, I believe, of the Sandman. And it starts off as, really interesting story about, this sort of personified force, Dream of the Endless, getting captured, and then getting freed and trying to get his powers back. And it's a really, really, really interesting story. And then the last issues in that first Preludes and Nocturnes was, I mean, the introduction of the character, I was several people had told me about, because in talking about how one of my favorite characters in the Discworld was Death of the Discworld, really recommended that another great character in a similar vein is Death of the Endless from the Sandman, who is again the personification of death. She leads people from the living into whatever comes next, and is portrayed in the Sandman as a cheerful goth chick. Um, and it's the eighth volume. It's the eighth edition, or whatever the right word would be, eighth story, chapter, whatever you want to call it, of the Sandman, called The Sound of Her Wings, where after getting his, you know it's a fairly predictable story, so I'm not feel like I'm not really spoiling anything. It's good. I mean, the first seven issues, that's the word I was looking for, are really, really good. There's a lot of twists and turns, but it's not too surprising in sort of the medium that he does get his powers back, but is just, after being in prison for 75 years, is having trouble with how changed the world is. And his sister, and Dream's sister, or Morpheus as he usually goes by, his sister Death, shows up to cheer him up, and she cheers him up by taking him along with her while she does her job of, collecting souls. And it was at the time, and remains to this day, one of the most absolutely brilliant things I have ever I have ever read, because it works. It is, you know, the issue is about death collecting souls, or leading souls from, life into whatever comes next. And it is somehow remarkably, like, there's a deep melancholy to it, but it's somehow remarkably uplifting. Cheerful is not the right word. It's a remarkably uplifting, and it's just such an exquisitely brilliant thing that I went back and bought the other 9 volumes of the Sandman story. See if I can remember. A Doll's House, Dream Country, Season of Mists, A Game of You, Fables and Reflections, Brief Live, The World End, The Kindly Ones in the Wake. The 9. There's different collections. There's one where it's collected into 4 volumes with some other stuff, and I devoured them all within like a week. And it is, and just the whole story from then on is remarkable, just absolutely remarkable. Even if you don't like graphic novels or comic books or whatever you want to call them, I would encourage anyone who loves fantasy, fairy tale, or just great philosophy, or just great literature, would strongly recommend anyone check out The Sandman. It is just a brilliantly and beautifully crafted idea of on change and how we face change, and life and death and morality, and you know the rules and situations we put ourselves in. It is so, and about dreams and memories and our wishes and desires, and how all those play together. And the artwork for various people is just absolutely exceptional. There are some great, the through line story of Morpheus, um, the through line story of Morpheus, in which, to use Neil Gaiman's own wonderfully succinct description, is the story is about, Dream of the Endless learns that sometimes you have to change or die, and he chooses. The through line is brilliant. There's some brilliant one-off stories, some of them like around historical characters that have gotten me interested in things. One of my favorite standalones is a story about Dream and his interaction, and the interactions of Dream and his other family members, with a real person named Joshua Norton, who in the 19th century declared himself the Emperor of America, and sort of his his interacting with some reflections on his life. I love that story. Um, and really, I mean, among just the beauty and the melancholy and just everything with this story, one of the things that really, I mean, it's one of the most remarkable literary achievements, not least of which is that while from the word go, Morpheus slash Dream of the Endless, the Sandman, is a very fascinating character and a very complex and fascinating character, but you learn some things about him and just some things with his personality, often wouldn't be a very, it's easy to say he's not a very sympathetic character, but Neil Gaiman makes you care about him by the end very, very sincerely and deeply. And then there's some other, one shots like Endless Nights. There's a couple of stories, focused around death that I have and love. Um, and yeah, it's just, yeah, I would say, while, my entry into fantasy and sort of still my all time favorite, book or what has the most influence on me is still Lord of the Rings. I would say the one that's charted over my whole life. I would say a close second book or story or whatever you want to call it for me is The Sandman, and I'd say it's probably the most effective on me as an adult. Um, is just how wonderful the story is, and I've read it multiple times. Um, Especially in times where I've been a little bit more like depressed and down. It's odd sort of melancholy cheerfulness really sort of cuts through and works with a lot of stuff. Since then, I've not read everything, but I've read quite a lot of. I think there's a few things I've missed along the way, but I've read quite a lot of what Neil Gaiman has done since then. American Gods is an absolutely brilliant book. I strongly recommend that. Um, Anansi Boys, which is a semi sequel to American Gods, is great. I love that. It's another great and really engaging book. Um, Ocean at the End of the Lane, the Graveyard Book, his Norse, his, sort of retelling and love of Norse mythology are all great. And then some of the work he's done, there's some great short stories out there you can find. Um, and some of them, I mean, there's been some great adaptions. I'd say one of my favorite movies is Stardust, which is an adaptation of his book by the same name. I really enjoy the book a lot. The book is very, is very fairy tale inspired or fairy tale based. The movie is a little bit more fantastical. There's a little bit more of a fantasy vibe to the movie and the way it sort of expands and changes some of the characters. Weirdly, even though I really like the book, I really do like the book. Weirdly, it's a rare case of where I kind of personally think the movie might actually be a better. Just some of the changes they made to the story and fleshing out some of the side characters a little bit more. Um, and at the expense of, I mean, there's some things like sort of some of the fantasy elements I don't think would have translated very well into a story anyway. I love the um, work he's done on. He's been the driving force between an adaptation of Good Omens into a mini series, and then there's a second season of it, and I think he's writing a third right now that are just really, really well done, really, really well crafted to um, just the story of it's a really great adaptation of the book. Weirdly, again, I think maybe because, I mean, there's just some things. It's a natural thing that, I mean, books and film are two different mediums, but there's just some things in, like, the book, particularly some of the humor that just doesn't translate the best. Even though I think the first season is a really great adaptation of Good Omens. The second season, because it doesn't have a book that I can compare it to, I think I almost like the second season better. That, and there's more focus. I mean, there's lots of side characters in the book Good Omens that they give attention to, but with the second season, very much focused primarily around. There's obviously still secondary characters, but very much focused around the angel and demon Aziraphale and Crawley, played brilliantly by Michael Sheen and David Tennant. That I think I almost like the second season better, and I'm really looking forward to. My understanding is that the third season, which will be the final, regard, that's as far as it's going. But the third season is based on some ideas and stuff that Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett wrote and jotted down, of a proposed sequel that they never ended up getting to, and that the second season is sort of a necessary bridge to get of how we get from where Good Omens ends to there, is my understanding. I'm not 100% sure that's correct, but I really recommend checking it out. It's on Amazon Prime. It is a really brilliant, really well made, really well acted, like really funny, clever, philosophical, insightful series. I'd strongly recommend you all check that out. So yeah, that's where, like I said, Neil Gaiman is a very, very, very big influence on me. I strongly recommend anyone who's interested in just great literature to check out The Sandman. I would also encourage everyone to check out Shadow of the Past and When the Sun Burned Red, my two books, both published and available on Amazon, and those are linked below. What are your thoughts on Neil Gaiman? What are some of your favorite stories of his? Do you like some of the adaptions of his work that have come out? Did I forget to mention anything that you love that I should check out? Because I'm sure I know there's a few things of Neil Gaiman's that I haven't read or haven't seen that I should check out. So if you have a particular recommendation, or would like to bring one of those to attention, I would love to check it out and read it. Um, but in the meantime, as well as leaving your comments and thoughts, I'd love for you to like, share, subscribe, check out my website and socials that are linked below. And I do hope you all have a wonderful day, get the chance to do or experience something creative, and I will catch you all in the next one.